Hello, I'm John Brisson, author of Fix Your Gut and Health Coach. Welcome to the Fix Your Gut YouTube channel. Today we're going to talk about the mineral salt and why you may not be getting enough of it for proper health. So there's a big difference between the typical salt that you get in a lot of processed foods and the typical salt that you buy, for example, like Walmart, the Great Value brand salt or the Morton's brand salt, where it's been very heavily refined. It's lost some of its mineral content. Certain additives may have been added to it, like dextrose, which could possibly come from GMO sources. Sodium ferrocyanide, which is a yellow prussate of sodium, which has just a real little bit of cyanide in it. But then again, you necessarily don't want to ingest as much cyanide as possible. Sodium silicoaluminate, which is going to give you a little bit of aluminum. It's also give you a little bit of silica too, which silica is beneficial for human health. It's definitely important for healthy nails. But the aluminum is not something that anybody wants to ingest. Granted, the amount, aluminum is very poorly absorbed unless a person has leaky gut in the gastrointestinal tract. But still, nonetheless, you don't want all these additives in your salt. You want good, clean, pure, not heavily refined salt that's got a good mineral content. So, like I said, it depends. It depends what is added to the salt. If you have potassium iodide, magnesium carbonate, calcium silicate, those are not so much. The iodide, you're going to get a little bit of iodine. Magnesium carbonate, of course, magnesium is a beneficial mineral. There's not really much downfall of ingesting that. Calcium silicate is going to give you a little bit of both calcium and silica. So those are not so harmful additives compared to sodium ferrocyanide or sodium silicoaluminate. Those I would not want to ingest. So it just depends on the additive and depends on the salt. So let's talk about healthy salt for a minute, or salts that John recommends. Pretty much only recommend one salt. And it's a salt that I've used. My wife has visited their factory in Utah. It is, there's salt mines too as well. It is real salt. It is Redmond real salt, and it comes out of some salt mines in Utah. It comes from a single source. It's not has so much of the pink like the Himalayan sea salt. And the reason why I don't necessarily recommend the Himalayan sea salt so much is because that pink, sometimes it's added to cheap Himalayan salt, the pink coloring is, and that's not good. The pink color is actually a high amount of natural fluoride. Natural fluoride is different than, ingesting chemical added fluoride in water. But still, nonetheless, you don't want to, it adds the amount of fluoride that your body burden has. And also, I think Celtic sea salt's another one that is fine in moderation. But this salt's been analyzed for heavy metals. It's MSDS verified. So this is the salt that I use. Okay, it does have a little bit of higher calcium levels than Celtic sea salt does. It does have higher levels of iodine as well in it, which is a benefit because this is not fortified with iodine. So if you're using this salt, you want to make sure that you're ingesting foods with iodine, like seafood and seaweed, and eggs and strawberries, in moderation to make up for the lack of iodine that you're not going to get, because this salt is it's not very refined. It's full of trace minerals, but then might not be enough iodine for you, which is the reason why they added iodine to salts to prevent against goiters. So yeah, studies have shown that one of the most common misconceptions of salt, and as long as your kidneys are healthy, you're not suffering from chronic kidney disease, is that salt increases blood pressure. There was a Cochrane review of 6,257 videos in a large meta-study that found there was no strong evidence that salt reduction reduced all-cause mortality and chronic heart disease, or even morbidity in normotensives, which are people with normal blood pressure, or people hypertensive that have hyper blood pressure. They have high blood pressure. So actually, in heart failure, diets, you'll see people recommend going on low sodium. Well, they've done studies with that. And actually, many people had to drop out of said studies, heart failure studies with reducing of salt, what they call the DASH diet. And some of those people that dropped out were because they died. So pretty much, if you look in the actual studies, a person with heart failure or a person with high blood pressure is worse off cutting out the salt than they are ingesting it in the first place. The problem isn't even probably the salt in and of itself that's the problem. A lot of people with high blood pressure, if any at all, because the amount of, the changes of systolic to diastolic blood pressure between someone who follows a very high salt diet and a person who doesn't is only 2 to 4 millimeters of mercury difference in their blood pressure. It's very minimal. So, I mean, again, the only difference is probably because usually foods that are high in salt are very refined, like fast food, TV dinners, food that people aren't supposed to be eating anyway. And so they're packed full of sodium, so it's probably not the sodium that's the problem, which is a very essential mineral, and we'll talk about why in a minute. It's the food that people are eating that has the salt in it. So, yeah, it is a myth, and I cannot tell you guys this enough, that normal salt intake, even elevated salt intake to a point, like, I mean, if you're eating like 20 or 30 or 40 grams of salt a day, of course you're going to swell up like a balloon and you're going to have high blood pressure, okay? That's not what I'm talking about here, though. What I'm talking about is, less than 10 grams of natural salt a day. You're salting your food. I mean, you're not drowning it in salt, but you're eating it. Even a person with high blood pressure, it's not going to greatly increase their blood pressure unless there's some other issues going on. Kidney function issues, medications, something else is going to cause them a spike of blood pressure when they're ingesting salt. Okay? So, again, heart failure studies, it is worse to go on the DASH diet, and lack of good salt ingestion is worse than ingesting the salt even when you have heart failure. Look at the studies. They are there. Okay? I do not recommend the DASH diet for anyone with heart failure. Instead, you should go on a more healthier diet like the Perfect Health diet and salt your food. So, what is salt? Salt is a chemical compound that's comprised of sodium chloride and trace minerals. Human beings need both sodium and chloride and thousands of biochemical reactions within the body. We need sodium to regulate blood volume, blood pressure, osmotic equilibrium, and for electrochemistry of the heart. It is one of the electrolytes that help conduct the heart. You have sodium, potassium, calcium, and magnesium. All of those are what drive the electrochemical magnetic pump, which is known as the heart. Okay? So sodium is extremely valuable for proper heart conduction. Chloride is also, a lot of people don't think about it. It's an important mineral too as well. Chloride is a negatively charged ion in the blood. It's also another electrolyte within the body. It's used by the body to produce hydrochloric acid when it bonds with hydrogen produced by hydrogen pump in our stomach cells. Chloride is also used to maintain proper pH to keep microbes at bay within the stomach, within the body. It's also a regulator of blood volume and serves as an electron donor for many reactions within the body, meaning that chloride is vital for mitochondrial health. So yes, you take something like sodium, you mix it with chlorine, which chlorine is deadly, and you get salt, which is sodium chloride, which is beneficial for human health. Natural salt like this, that's less refined than Morton salt, contains a lot of primary minerals and trace minerals that are lacking in our modern diet. Primary minerals include calcium, magnesium, and sulfur. Trace minerals include zinc, selenium, iodine, molybdenum, chromium, cobalt, and many others that you will find in a good salt like this real salt that I have in my hands. So, why might now there are a few people that may need to limit their salt intake. Now, granted, you need to be ingesting this as your primary source of salt or Celtic sea salt instead of Morton salt. If you have to limit your salt intake, you want it to come more from this, less from processed foods or Morton salt. People with advanced kidney disease or people on dialysis, might have to limit the amount of sodium that you're taking in, or people with certain medications, or if they swell to salt. Also, if you're suffering from Th17 dominance, you may want to avoid heavy salt intake. I'd probably recommend no more than 3 to 4 grams daily and spread it out between meals, because their studies have shown that salt can make Th17 dominance worse. In addition, also people with H. pylori dysbiosis may want to avoid a large amount of salt, because studies have shown that it can increase H. pylori virulence, which H. pylori can also trigger Th17 dominance as well. So yes, if you are Th17 dominant, you want to reduce your salt. If you ingest meals that are high in salt, they make you feel very bad. They give you brain fog, fatigue, more inflammation, swelling, even more histamine issues. All those Th17 is a combination of like histamine and inflammation, where Th1 is more inflammation, Th2 is more histamine type reactions. Then you probably want to limit your salt. If you have H. pylori dysbiosis, you probably also want to limit your salt to about 3 to 4 grams of natural salt a day. You generally no more than that until the Th17 dominance is resolved, or until the H. pylori dysbiosis is resolved. So, how much daily salt should a person take in day? It varies. It varies, how much you weigh, your need for salt, hydration, your activity amount, if you're on any medications, non-native EMF exposure. I generally just recommend that you liberally salt your food. If you do that, you probably should get enough in. People who have adrenal fatigue or blood volume issues, who need more salt, like POTS, postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, then you want to make sure that you get your proper amounts of salt in. That may help improve your blood volume, which may help may help keep your blood pressure more in line, so that when you stand up, your heart doesn't shoot up with the tachycardia and you don't pass out. So with people with POTS, postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, who may generally have low blood pressure, and might have hypertension, then you want to make sure that you might want to get a little bit more extra salt in to help increase your blood volume, and therefore help combat some of the side effects associated with POTS. But yes, those are people who may want to increase their salt, but for the average person, there's not really any recommendation for the amount of salt that you ingest, that you just salt your food liberally. And I'd probably say for most people, you would not want more than 10 grams of salt a day. Probably shoot for 6 to 8, maybe less, maybe 4 to 6, depending on the person. But yeah, if you're just salting your food and you're eating it, then you should be fine. You shouldn't go over that amount. There's, unless a person is salting every bite, you shouldn't get higher than 10 grams of salt a day. And if you're eating really salty processed foods, which most people should not be anyway, then you probably don't want to add very much salt to it, if any at all. So that's about it. That wraps up our video on salt. If you like this video, please like, share, and subscribe if you found it informative. And I hope you have a great day.